He always answered her calls. Every night, every lunch break, every small errand in between. But on January 27th, 2023, the phone just kept ringing. No answer. By midnight, the police would find 56-year-old Tanya Fandrich sitting in his car, his head tilted against the window, his face blue, his neck snapped. Whoever had done it hadn't taken his wallet, his phone, or his keys. They'd taken only his life, and then vanished. It should have been a quiet morning in Hillsboro, Oregon. The kind of cold Pacific Northwest dawn, where your breath hangs in the air and the light never really turns gold, just gray. In the underground parking garage where Kenny parked every day, the world was silent except for the echo of tires against concrete. At 6:30, his black Honda Civic rolled into its usual spot on the second level. He turned off the ignition, grabbed his toolbox, and locked the door behind him. Another shift, another day. Nothing out of the ordinary, but a few floors above, someone else was there. A man dressed head to toe in black, his face hidden behind a mask, moved between parked cars with slow, deliberate steps. In his hand was a can of black spray paint. One hiss at a time, he painted over the lenses of the garage's security cameras. He worked with confidence. He knew where every camera was and how to reach it. This wasn't improvisation. It was rehearsal brought to life. When the last lens went dark, he stepped back, shook the can once, and slipped into a blue Buick waiting by the exit. The engine started quietly, and the car disappeared into the gray morning light. Hours later, the garage filled again with the routine noise of an ordinary workday. Then, at 1:13 in the afternoon, another vehicle appeared, a maroon minivan. It moved slowly, circling the levels as though searching for a familiar space. Eventually it stopped, right next to Kenny's Honda. The driver didn't get out. The van just idled for a moment, then went still. Time passed. 1 hour, 2, 3. Outside, the sky dimmed toward dusk. Inside, nothing moved but the flicker of fluorescent lights overhead. Then, footsteps. Kenny's workday was over. He was tired, ready to go home. He pressed his key fob, and the Civic's headlights flashed twice in response. From the corner of the garage, a faint shimmer of movement, a shape between the two vehicles, flickered across one half-painted camera lens. The headlights blinked again, then faster, and then they stopped. 10 minutes later, the maroon van reversed out of the space, turned toward the ramp, and rolled quietly into the night. When Tanya Fandrich called her husband that evening, she told herself he'd probably left his phone in the truck again. But when he didn't pick up the second time, or the fifth, her stomach twisted. Kenny always answered, always. She opened her phone's location app. The little blue dot showed he was still at work, still sitting in that same parking garage. She called the police. When officers arrived, they found his Civic exactly where the GPS said it would be. The car door was locked, the engine off. Through the window, they could see Kenny slumped in the driver's seat, motionless. When they opened the door, the truth hit them all at once. No blood, no signs of robbery, just a man whose neck had been snapped in silence. Tanya arrived minutes later. Before anyone spoke, she saw the look on the officers' faces and understood. Her scream echoed off the concrete walls and faded into the winter air. That night, investigators began piecing together the fragments left behind, the painted-over cameras, the van, the missing minutes. But nothing prepared them for what they would find once they traced the story back. Because this wasn't the work of a stranger. The man who planned Kenny Fandrich's death had been circling his life for years, and the first warning signs had been there all along. 11 months earlier, before the headlines, before the parking garage, Kenny Fandrich was just trying to get to work. It was still dark out, the roads slick from an early spring rain. He turned down a quiet stretch of highway, headlights cutting through the mist, and that's when he noticed them. The same headlights, staying just far enough back to look casual, too casual. He slowed. So did the other car. He changed lanes. The car followed. At first, he tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just someone heading the same way. But then the vehicle sped up, closing the gap until Kenny could see the shape of it clearly in his rearview mirror, a blue Buick. Kenny's hands tightened around the steering wheel. He pulled off onto a side road, pretending he'd forgotten something. The Buick followed again. That's when he grabbed his phone and dialed 911. When police arrived, the two cars were pulled over on the shoulder. Body cam footage from that morning shows a middle-aged man stepping calmly out of the Buick, his voice polite, even cheerful. "Morning, officer," he says. "I'm Dr. Stephen Milner. I'm a veterinarian here in town." The officer, clearly cautious, asks the obvious question. "Why are you following this man, sir?" Milner's answer is almost casual, like he's explaining a misunderstanding at the grocery store. "I'm just trying to get money out of his wife," he says, nodding toward Kenny's car. "She owes me." Kenny sits in his Honda, watching from the rearview mirror. His pulse is racing, but the name, Dr. Milner, sends a different kind of chill through him. Because he knows that name. Everyone in the Fandrich household does. Dr. Stephen Milner wasn't some random stranger. He was Tanya's former boss, the man she'd worked with for nearly 20 years at a veterinary clinic before she quit. The man who, months earlier, had been leaving notes on her windshield, showing up at her new job, sending long, rambling letters about how she'd betrayed him. The officer tries to reason with him. "Sir, you can't follow people. You can't chase them down like this. It's harassment." Milner doesn't flinch. He just shrugs and says, "She's lying to you. She's not safe. He's not who you think he is." The officer warns him to leave Kenny and Tanya alone, threatens arrest if it happens again. On camera, Milner nods obediently, his hands folded in front of him like a man accepting a parking ticket. But as the officer walks away, Milner mutters something under his breath. "She's going to die if you don't stop him." The words hang in the air, quiet, almost conversational. But when investigators later replay that footage, those words feel different. Not like a warning, like a promise. Kenny drove home that morning, shaken but not surprised. For months, Tanya had been telling him that Milner wouldn't let go, that he called constantly, begged her to talk, sent gifts, threatened to harm himself when she didn't respond. Kenny had hoped it was just talk. Now seeing that blue Buick in his mirror, he knew better. That morning on the highway was the first time police saw Stephen Milner for what he really was. Not a scorned boss, not a jilted friend, but a man obsessed. A man rehearsing something much darker. And in the end, he was right about one thing. Someone was going to die, but not the person he thought. For nearly 20 years, Tanya Fandrich and Dr. Stephen Milner worked side by side. At the clinic in Oregon City, they were a team. Long days, endless appointments, emergency calls that ran late into the night. To their clients, they were the perfect pair. The gentle vet with the steady hands and the trusted technician who always knew exactly what he needed before he asked. Stephen Milner had built that clinic from nothing. He was known around town as the country vet. Soft-spoken, patient, the kind of man who remembered every pet's name and every owner's heartbreak. But behind the reputation, behind the calm professionalism, was a man quietly unraveling. By 2017, Milner's second marriage was falling apart. His wife had packed up and left, taking what little warmth remained in his life. He poured everything into his work and into the one person who still seemed to see him as more than a doctor, Tanya. At that time, Tanya's own life wasn't peaceful either. Her marriage to Kenny was strained. Long work hours, financial pressure, and Kenny's growing dependence on alcohol had turned affection into arguments. When Milner listened, she felt understood. When he offered advice, she felt safe. What began as friendship, two people commiserating over failing marriages, slowly crossed into something more. A late-night text turned into a secret dinner. A ride home turned into a kiss. And soon, Tanya and Stephen were tangled in an affair neither of them could fully control. For Tanya, it was confusion, comfort in the arms of someone who cared when her husband didn't seem to. But for Stephen, it was something else entirely. It wasn't just affection, it was possession. The affair didn't stay secret for long. One night, Kenny followed his instincts and his wife and found her at Stephen's home. The confrontation was explosive. Tanya ended it that night. She swore to repair her marriage, to move on, to pretend the whole thing had never happened. Stephen didn't move on. He couldn't. He started sending her letters, not love letters, but long, rambling confessions that swung between pleading and fury. Pages filled with lines like, "You were meant to be with me," and "He doesn't deserve you." When she didn't respond, the letters turned darker. Accusations, demands, then lies. One day, Tanya received a package. Inside was a letter from Stephen, and a photo. It showed Kenny with another woman and a child, smiling like a happy family. But even at a glance, it was obvious the image was fake, clumsily photoshopped, desperate. Tanya ignored it, but Stephen kept pushing. He left gifts at her doorstep, waited outside the clinic, called her phone dozens of times a day. To everyone else, he was still the kind, gentle vet. But Tanya saw the truth, the obsession growing behind his calm smile. When she finally stopped responding altogether, Stephen began shifting his focus from her to Kenny. He told himself that Kenny was the problem, that if Kenny were gone, everything would fall back into place. By then, Tanya wasn't just uncomfortable, she was afraid. What had started as an affair was turning into something else, something that didn't feel like love anymore. It felt like a warning, because Stephen Milner wasn't just heartbroken, he was obsessed, and he was about to prove how far obsession could go. The first sign that things had gone from strange to dangerous came one October night in 2017. Kenny and Tanya were at home when their phone buzzed, an alert from their security system. The camera mounted above their driveway had picked up movement near Kenny's car. Kenny opened the app, expecting maybe a raccoon or a passing cat. Instead, the footage showed a man crouched beneath his Honda Civic. It was dark, the image grainy, but the outline was clear. The build, the stance, the way he moved. Both of them recognized it instantly. Steven? Within minutes, they were on the phone with the police. Given the way he'd been acting, they were terrified of what he might have done. And when the bomb squad arrived, even the officers seemed cautious. The techs swept the undercarriage of the car carefully, inch by inch, until one of them called out, "Got something." It wasn't a bomb. It was a small black box, a GPS tracker. Steven Milner had been tracking their every move. When confronted, Steven didn't deny it. He looked the officers straight in the eye and said, "I was just trying to protect Tanya. He's dangerous. I needed to know where he was taking her." It was a story he'd repeat again and again over the years. Every action, every intrusion, every violation justified by the same excuse: "I'm protecting her." But what Tanya and Kenny saw wasn't protection, it was obsession, and it was only getting worse. A few months later, they noticed Steven lurking near their driveway again. Then another time, behind the fence. Tanya would find notes tucked under her windshield wipers, flowers left at the doorstep. Then came the letters. "I forgive you," one began, the handwriting shaky but careful. "I know you're scared. I know he's still manipulating you. But one day, you'll see that I was the only one who ever really loved you." Days later, another letter arrived, this time filled with anger. "How could you do this to me? I gave you everything. You made me believe in you, and you turned your back on me. I can't stop thinking about you. I can't sleep. I can't breathe without you." And then, as if nothing had happened, another. "I'll always love you. You're my best friend. Please call me." The tone swung wildly, love to rage, guilt to pity. Tanya began to feel like she was being watched, even when she wasn't. Kenny started checking the locks 3 times a night. Then one afternoon, Kenny came out to his car and froze. There, on the passenger seat, was a single condom, unwrapped, left in plain view. He knew exactly what it meant. Steven was trying to make it look like he was cheating again, trying to wedge his way back into Tanya's mind, to turn her against the man she'd chosen over him. When that didn't work, Steven got bolder. One evening, he walked straight up to their front door. Kenny opened it to find him standing there, calm, eyes wide, voice trembling. "I just need to talk to her," Steven said. "You don't understand. She's in danger." Kenny stepped outside, blocking the doorway. "You need to leave." Steven took a step closer. "He's gonna kill her. You'll see. You'll all see." That's when Kenny snapped. "If you ever come near my wife again, I'll call the cops." Steven's expression shifted, the calm slipping away for a flash of something darker. Then he smiled. "I'll always care about her," he said softly, "even if you don't." Kenny filed a restraining order that same week, but as he signed the papers, he couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't be enough. Because how do you put distance between yourself and someone who refuses to let go? How do you protect yourself from a man who calls his stalking love? For Kenny and Tanya, the walls were closing in, and Steven Milner was already inside them. By early 2022, Tanya Fandrich's life was fraying at the edges. Every knock at the door, every phone call, every unfamiliar car on the street set his nerves on fire. He had warned friends, neighbors, even the police. Steven Milner was dangerous. Milner wasn't just obsessed, he was relentless, cunning, and already crossing boundaries that should have landed him behind bars. Yet time and again, the system failed to stop him. Officers responded to calls, they took statements, they filed reports, they gave warnings, they spoke to Milner, but they didn't arrest him. When a protective order was finally issued, it was temporary. It expired, and Steven kept following, calling, showing up, leaving letters. Every time the police reminded him again and again to stay away, Milner nodded politely, made excuses, and walked away. In March of that year, Kenny felt the pressure building to a breaking point. Early one morning, while driving to work, he noticed the familiar shadow of a car behind him. Panic set in, cold and sharp. He told himself to calm down, but the fear had been growing for months. By the time he reached a quiet stretch of road, his hands were trembling on the wheel. He called 911, voice tight, urgent. A police officer would pull over the man following him, Dr. Steven Milner. Body cam footage captured the polite veneer, the excuses, the casual explanation about getting money out of his wife. Milner left with a warning, but nothing else. Kenny tried to hold on to normalcy, but his anxiety festered. Friends noticed he was drinking heavily again, something he had sworn off years ago. Even small disagreements with Tanya turned explosive. The fear had taken root so deep, he no longer trusted his own judgment. Nights became a struggle. Sleep was punctuated with nightmares of the blue Buick, the minivan, the shadows that moved just beyond the streetlights. On March 28, 2022, that fear nearly cost him his life in another way. He crashed his car into a tree on a side road, trembling as he stepped out. Officers arrived to find a man shaken, slurring, confessing, I didn't want to drive. My wife, she's probably at his house, I thought. His voice broke. He couldn't finish the thought. He had been terrified Tanya might be at Milner's home. The stress, the paranoia, the constant fear of Milner's next move, it had driven him to the edge. Yet even with the restraining order, even with repeated police encounters, Stephen continued to stalk them. Every violation should have triggered immediate action. Every time he crossed the line, Kenny's warnings went unheeded. And Kenny began saying it aloud, the words carrying the weight of months of dread. He's going to kill me. It wasn't bravado or exaggeration. It was truth. The paranoia, the fear, the sleepless nights, they were all based on a man who refused to stop. A man whose obsession was growing more dangerous with every ignored warning. By the time January 2023 rolled around, Kenny's sense of security had disappeared entirely. He wasn't just afraid of what Stephen might do to Tanya. He feared for his own life, every moment, every day. And as history would tragically prove, his instincts were right. The system had failed him. The warnings had gone unheeded. And Stephen Milner remained free. January 27, 2023 began like any other workday for Kenny Fandrich. The winter sky hung low and gray over Hillsboro, Oregon, the streets slick from a recent rain. But someone had been watching him for hours before he even arrived at his shift. Dr. Stephen Milner had planned every detail. He knew the garage, knew where the cameras were mounted. Earlier that morning, he had donned dark clothes, a mask covering his face, and moved silently among the rows of cars. Spray paint hissed against the lenses, blacking out the majority of surveillance angles. A few cameras remained partially unobstructed, enough to capture fragments, shadows, a boot, the glint of a car door handle, but nothing to clearly identify him. Satisfied, he returned to a blue Buick and drove away. Hours later, he switched vehicles, a maroon minivan this time, and slowly entered the garage. He pulled up beside Kenny's Honda Civic and settled in, engine off, waiting. The van blended with the quiet rhythm of the garage. No one could know it was there. Time passed. The cold hum of fluorescent lights filled the concrete space. The garage seemed empty. Too empty. When Kenny finished his shift, he walked toward his car, tools in hand, tired but unaware. His headlights flashed as he pressed the unlock button. One blink, two. Nothing seemed unusual, but in the corner of his vision, a shadow moved beside his car. The minivan sat there silent, its presence unnoticed. His headlights flickered. Short pause. A faint echo of tires or movement. Silence. He reached the driver's side, opened the door, settled into his seat. The engine was cold, the air heavy. Another flicker of the headlights. Then stillness. Moments stretched into 10 minutes. The van reversed. It drove away quietly, leaving the garage as empty as it had been that morning. Hours later, Tanya Fandrich tried calling him. His phone went unanswered. She checked the shared location. The dot didn't move. Something was wrong. Panic gripped her. When police arrived, the scene confirmed every fear. Kenny's body sat slumped in the driver's seat. His face was tinged blue, his neck twisted unnaturally. He was gone. Tanya arrived moments later. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. The police, the Civic, the unmistakable stillness. Oh my God, no, no. Her voice trembled, repeating the words as if saying them aloud could undo them. This can't be happening. This can't be real. She sank to the ground beside the car, hands pressed to her face, the weight of grief pressing down like the cold concrete beneath her. She had lost him. Not in a sudden accident, not to illness, but in a moment of premeditated cruelty. For Tanya, every warning, every letter, every incident over the past 6 years crashed into her all at once. The obsession she had feared, the man she had tried to escape, had finally broken through every boundary. In the emptiness of that garage with headlights flickering faintly, the truth was undeniable. Kenny Fandrich was dead, and Stephen Milner's obsession had claimed its ultimate victim. After Kenny's death, investigators were faced with a puzzle. The underground garage offered few clues, and the van had been abandoned and later scrapped. But small fragments of evidence remained, enough for detectives willing to dig. The first breakthrough came from surveillance footage. Despite Milner's careful planning, one camera had been only partially obstructed. The recording caught the masked figure spray painting other cameras, a glimpse of a forehead crease between his eyebrows, a small but distinct feature Milner had worn since adolescence. The blue Buick and later the maroon minivan were traced through parking lots, toll cameras, and vehicle registration databases. Hours of cross-referencing linked each movement back to Milner. On January 31st, 2023, officers pulled him over. He sat calmly in the driver's seat, mask on, hands on the steering wheel. When asked to step out, he complied without resistance, speaking rationally and clearly, insisting again that everything he had done was to protect Tanya. A search of his home revealed more about his obsession. On a bedside table sat photographs of Tanya, old letters, love notes from years past, meticulously organized. Pairs of her underwear were folded neatly nearby, and in the corner of the room stood a bizarre cardboard cutout of himself. Muscular, glistening, chest tattooed with a paw print. Investigators would later remark that the shrine was more than disturbing. It was the physical manifestation of a fixation that had grown unchecked. The trial began in January 2025. The prosecution laid out 6 years of escalating harassment: the letters, the tracking devices, the confrontations, the surveillance, and finally, the murder. GPS data placed Milner at the scene. DNA evidence linked him to Kenny's final struggle. The defense tried to frame the murder as self-defense. Stephen Milner took the stand and spoke with chilling calm, claiming he had only wanted to protect Tanya. He insisted that Kenny had attacked him, that he had pushed him in self-defense, that the death was unintentional. The prosecution dismantled this story methodically. They highlighted the years of stalking, the patterns of obsession, the intrusive letters, and the premeditation of the day of the murder. Spray-painted cameras, switched vehicles, hours of waiting. Every effort Milner had made to justify his actions crumbled in the light of the evidence. 6 hours of jury deliberation ended with the quiet, heavy moment everyone had feared and anticipated. The foreman stood, clearing his throat. As to count 1, murder in the second degree, guilty. Count 2, stalking, guilty. Count 3, guilty, all counts. Tears ran silently down Tanya's face. She remained stoic as the words sank into the room, the finality of justice settling around them. Stephen Milner was led away, sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars. When Tanya stood to deliver her victim impact statement, the courtroom fell silent. Her voice was steady, piercing, a mixture of grief, rage, and clarity. For years, you tormented Kenny and me. You told yourself you were a hero. You were not. You were a coward. You could not accept rejection. You could not respect boundaries. And in the end, you destroyed what you could not possess. I loved Kenny. We weren't perfect, but there was nothing you could do to justify taking his life. Her words were more than grief. They were a testament, a warning, a reflection of the danger of obsession left unchecked, of warning signs ignored, of systems that failed to protect the vulnerable. Beyond the courtroom, her message resonates universally. Stalking can escalate. Boundaries can be crossed. Lives can be destroyed. And yet, despite the horror, Tanya found strength. She faced the man who had terrorized her and her husband and spoke the truth. The echoes of that day linger, not just in Hillsborough, not just in the trial records, but in the lesson it leaves behind. After 6 years of harassment and heartbreak, Stephen Milner finally lost control, and Tanya Fandrich lost his life. In the end, obsession wasn't love, it was possession, and it destroyed them all.